I'm about to tell y'all something that stunned me. I mean, I was shocked when I seen this. And I'm finna play a clip for y'all real quick, and y'all gonna be shocked too. Let me get this pulled up for y'all before I give y'all any commentary, before we react to anything that's coming. I mean, before I react to his video, because this right here stunned me. So this is Dan Dakich. Dan Dakich is an Indiana legend. Listen to him.
She's being demonstrative, and frankly, this is just another example of her being a jackass.
Dan Dakich just crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. He went on air and called the face of the WNBA a jackass and a menace, burning every bridge in Indianapolis. The backlash was instantaneous, and the consequences are shaking the sports media world to its core right now. This wasn't just a hot take. It was a career-ending verbal explosion that left everyone in the industry absolutely stunned. Nobody expected an Indiana legend to turn on the hometown hero with such vitriol. But here we are watching the fallout in real time. The silence from his usual supporters is deafening as the professional ramifications begin to settle in.
Legend. Listen to him.
She's being demonstrative, and frankly, this is just another example of her being a jackass.
Whoa!
I understand little Caitlin has the children of the corn wrapped up, and I understand a bunch of middle-aged guys can't stand me, so they love her. But you can all suck it. That's exactly right. You can all suck it. And everybody's making excuses. Everybody's saying, oh, my God, it's so in-depth. It's so hard. Poor Caitlin. She's in such a... No, just don't act like a... Just don't act like an entitled... Period. Because when you watch her, you get really...
Dakich has always been known for his unfiltered opinions, but what he just said about Caitlin Clark has pushed things way too far. He didn't just critique her game, he attacked her character with words that most networks simply won't tolerate. Calling a generational talent an absolute menace while mocking her entire fan base is a bold move, but it might be the last one he ever makes. The sports world is reeling because this felt personal, aggressive, and completely uncalled for given Clark's impact on the game. It's one thing to be a contrarian, but it's another to use the kind of language that triggers immediate termination clauses.
Pretty hard, man. And yeah, we finna react to it, dog. This right here is mind-blowing, guys. I cannot believe this, what I'm saying right now. So Dan Dakich had his podcast, man, and this came out yesterday, I believe. Yeah, yesterday. He ain't getting no views on it.
America's favorite diva, Caitlin Clark, getting talked to harshly by her coach, and all she does is bitch, whine, and moan and come back. Now, Caitlin Clark defenders, I was fouled. I wasn't fouled. She's being demonstrative, and frankly, this is just another example of her being a jackass. And
the specific moment that sent shock waves through the internet was when Dage looked directly into the camera and called Clark a jackass. He doubled down, claiming she's an entitled diva who's essentially holding her team back from greatness. This isn't just some random blogger talking. This is a man who played for Bobby Knight and has deep roots in the Indiana basketball scene. To hear him use such derogatory language against the woman who single-handedly revitalized the Indiana Fever is almost unbelievable. He even went after the fans, calling them the children of the corn and telling them all to suck it live on air.
She's in such a... No, just don't act like a dick. When you watch her, you get really tired of it. And people say, well, Jordan did that. She ain't Jordan. And Jordan didn't do dribbling down the court, bitching literally on every single call, bitching at her coaches, bitching at everybody. It got in depth. And we had to bring in the big guns. We had to bring in the lesbians, although I don't think Sue Bird's a lesbian. We had to bring in Reggie Miller's sister, Cheryl, and Sue Bird for an in-depth, nuanced discussion. Everything's nuanced. No, it's not. Quit acting like a dick, Caitlin Clark. And people...
Wow, dog. I mean, I've never seen somebody go at Caitlin.
If the insults toward Clark weren't enough, Dage took a massive gamble by bringing sexuality into the conversation in the most offensive way possible. He described the WNBA as a league of angry African American lesbians. A comment that has human resources departments everywhere working overtime. This kind of rhetoric is exactly what sponsors and broadcast partners flee from at lightning speed. It wasn't a slip of the tongue, he said it with conviction, effectively alienating the entire league and its demographic in one fell swoop. The industry consensus is that there is simply no coming back from a statement that inflammatory in today's media climate.
You're a diva. Hey, look, nobody is smarter in women's basketball than Steph White. I mean, nobody. Zero.
Oh my God, you tripping now, Dan. Dan tripping now, dog. Let's pull up. Okay, if she's so smart, right? If Stephanie White is so smart, right? She couldn't even succeed on a collegiate level. Let's pull up Stephanie White. Vanderbilt. Time. And let's ask Google AI. Let's go to AI mode.
Many are wondering why Dakich would suddenly turn so hard against Caitlin Clark after seemingly supporting her earlier in the year. The theory gaining traction is his deep-rooted connection to Indiana native and coach Stephanie White. Dakich praised White as the smartest person in basketball while simultaneously tearing Clark down for not following her lead. He claimed White knows Clark is a menace and that the team actually plays better when their superstar is sitting on the bench. It feels like a coordinated effort to protect a friend's coaching reputation by throwing the best player in the world under the bus.
He knows that you are an absolute menace, and you don't win enough. That's the bigger issue. I mean, you're on a 500 team now. Are the Fever tough enough to work through this? They haven't been. They had their best run without Caitlin Clark. They did. So, again, what a great country when this is what we're discussing. A woman who's never won nothing, playing in a league of angry African-American lesbians, for a coach that's trying to actually coach her, and she won't accept it. Wow. But we're all supposed to genuflect? Not me. No, not I. All right, here's Whitlock. He had some things to say about my...
One of the most delusional parts of his rant was the insistence that the Indiana Fever are actually a superior team without Caitlin Clark on the floor. He cited their record and their performance in the WNBA Cup as proof that she is the problem, not the solution. To any rational basketball fan, this sounds like pure insanity. But Dakich was adamant. He argued that Clark's style of play, her bad shots, and her alleged attitude are an indictment of her own talent rather than a coaching failure.
Women are going to be allowed to compete in basketball without all of this pressure to transition to an alternative lifestyle. This is Dakich. Clark has been in Indy right 3 years.
Now, you're talking about two different things. Now, you're talking about how she acts as a diva. And now you're talking about the gay lesbian thing. Now, I get it. You want to see the big picture. Let me explain to you the big picture. The big picture is her ending up as the best player ever, as people tell me she's supposed to be. That's the big picture. And her team winning a
The drama escalated even further when Dakich turned his sights on his longtime associate Jason Whitlock. Whitlock, who is usually known for his own controversial takes, actually tried to play the voice of reason for once. He suggested that while Clark might have some diva tendencies, the organization needs to work through it for the bigger picture of the sport. Dakich wasn't having any of it, telling Whitlock to stop the theater and accusing him of not knowing anything about real locker room dynamics. Watching these two media titans go at each other's throats over Caitlin Clark shows just how divisive this situation has become.
That is why.
Hold on. The dumbest human beings, I've always said it, when it comes to actual sports are guys like Jason Whitlock and sports writers. Because they don't know jack shit. It indicts one person and one person only, and that is Caitlin Clark. Look, Whitlock's never been in a locker room for real. He says he was some kind of football. No, he's never been in a locker room for real. Maybe to sneak a peek, maybe to get an autograph, maybe to ask a question, I don't know. But the truth of the matter is, it is a massive indictment how the
DIC went as far as to mock Whitlock's athletic background, claiming he's never been in a real locker room unless he was sneaking a peek or asking for an autograph. This kind of personal infighting is rare for these two, who often find themselves on the same side of cultural issues. It proves that the Caitlin Clark effect is so powerful it can even tear apart the most established media alliances. Dage is positioning himself as the only one brave enough to tell the truth, but most people see it as a man who has completely lost his grip on reality and professional decorum. This personal attack only added fuel to the fire. Not content with attacking Clark and the fans, Dakich also took swipes at legends like Sue Bird and Cheryl Miller. He mocked the idea of needing a nuanced discussion about Clark's impact, calling it unnecessary theater involving people he clearly doesn't respect. By dismissing some of the greatest minds in women's basketball history, he's effectively isolated himself from any credible basketball circle. You can't claim to be an expert on the game while simultaneously insulting the icons who built the very league you're covering. It's a scorched earth policy that has left his reputation in absolute tatters across the entire industry. Dage's obsession with labeling Clark a diva seems to stem from her demonstrative nature on the court. He constantly pointed out her frustration with officials and her coaches as evidence that she's a bad teammate. While many stars in the NBA and WNBA show emotion, Dage is holding Clark to a standard that feels targeted and borderline obsessive. He refuses to acknowledge the immense pressure she's under as the face of a league. Instead, choosing to focus on every eye roll or gesture as a sign of deep character flaws. It's a narrative that is clearly designed to devalue everything she has managed to accomplish. To bolster his defense of Stephanie White, Dage ignored some very glaring facts about her coaching history that were quickly brought to light. Critics pointed out her disastrous tenure at Vanderbilt, where she had a winning percentage of only 36% and never recorded a winning season. If she's the basketball guru Dage claims she is, the numbers certainly don't show it. The contrast between his blind loyalty to White and his visceral hatred for Clark is the smoking gun that suggests this entire rant was motivated by personal bias rather than objective sports analysis. It makes his entire argument look completely compromised. Rumors are now swirling that the fallout from these comments has led to Dakich being shown the door by his employers. In an era where sensitivity and inclusivity are paramount for major media outlets, his comments about the league and its players are a liability that no company wants to touch. Being fired from a position of influence is the ultimate price to pay for a few minutes of viral outrage. The report suggests that the decision was swift, as the backlash from sponsors made it impossible for him to stay on the air. It's a stunning fall from grace for a man who was once considered an Indiana legend. This situation perfectly illustrates the unprecedented power Caitlin Clark holds in the sports world today. One negative comment about her can spark a global conversation, but Dakich's level of disrespect triggered a nuclear response. He underestimated the loyalty of her fan base and the protective nature of the new WNBA audience. You can critique her shooting or her turnovers, but when you resort to name-calling and insults, the audience will turn on you instantly. Dakich tried to play the villain and ended up becoming a cautionary tale for anyone else thinking about crossing that line. The consequences are real. Dakich's decision to insult the fans by calling them the children of the corn was perhaps his biggest tactical error. These are the people who buy the tickets, watch the games, and keep sports media personalities in business by telling them to suck it and mocking their support of Clark. He essentially committed career hariri. You can't expect to have a platform if you're actively antagonizing the very people who provide you with an audience. It was a moment of pure arrogance that showed just how out of touch he has become with the modern sports landscape. He effectively bit the hand that feeds him. Inside the Indiana Fever organization, the tension is reportedly at an all-time high following these comments. Having a local media figure create such a toxic environment around the team's star player is the last thing a young roster needs. While Dakich thinks he's helping Stephanie White, he's actually making her job significantly harder by fueling the fire of controversy. Every press conference and interview will now be overshadowed by these comments, creating a distraction that could derail the entire season. It's a mess that started with one man's ego and has now grown into a full-blown organizational crisis. Dage also tried to shut down comparisons between Clark and Michael Jordan, claiming that Jordan never acted like a diva on the court. Anyone who actually watched Jordan knows he was one of the most demonstrative and demanding players in history. Dage is using a distorted version of history to justify his current dislike for Clark. This kind of intellectual dishonesty is what happens when someone is more focused on winning an argument than being accurate. By rewriting the past to fit his narrative, he's lost all credibility with fans who actually know the history of the game and its legendary stars. There is a growing sense that certain members of the media are intentionally trying to drive a wedge between Clark and the rest of the league. Dakich's comments represent the most extreme version of this trend. By framing her as an outsider who doesn't belong or respect the game, they are attempting to isolate her from her peers. However, this strategy seems to be backfiring as more people come to her defense against these unfair attacks. The more Dakich and others try to tear her down, the more the public seems to rally around her, proving that her impact is far greater than any one critic can handle. Beyond just losing his job, Dakich could be facing serious professional challenges regarding the nature of his comments. Using derogatory terms to describe a specific group of people can often lead to permanent blacklisting from the industry. Most professional contracts have morality clauses that allow for immediate termination without pay if a personality brings disrepute to the company. Dakich might have thought he was just being edgy for views, but he may have just signed away his financial future for a moment of internet notoriety. The industry is moving away from this kind of shock jock behavior. Perhaps the most telling sign of how bad this is for Dakich is the silence from his colleagues in the industry. Usually, when a media personality gets into hot water, there are at least a few defenders who talk about free speech or the cancel culture narrative. But in this case, the comments were so egregious that nobody wants to be associated with him. Even those who have agreed with him in the past are keeping their distance, realizing that this is a bridge too far. He's standing on an island of his own making, and the tide is coming in fast with no rescue in sight. He is truly on his own. This scandal marks a turning point in how sports talk is conducted, especially regarding the WNBA. The days of being able to make disparaging remarks about female athletes without consequence are officially over. Caitlin Clark has brought a level of scrutiny and accountability to the coverage of women's sports that didn't exist before. Figures like Dakich, who are stuck in an old way of thinking, are being filtered out of the system. It's a harsh lesson in evolution. And unfortunately for Dan, he decided to fight against progress. Instead of embracing the massive growth and potential of the game, social media has been relentless in its pursuit of accountability for Dakich. Within hours of his rant, fans had compiled lists of his past controversies and were tagging his sponsors and employers. This is the power of a modern fan base. They have the ability to affect change in a way that was impossible 20 years ago. Dakich underestimated the digital footprint of his words and the speed at which information travels. He thought he was talking to a small group of like-minded people, but he was actually broadcasting his downfall to the entire world in high definition. There is no hiding from the internet. For a man who was considered an Indiana legend, the damage to his local reputation might be the hardest thing to recover from. Indianapolis is a basketball city, and turning your back on the biggest thing to happen to Indiana basketball in decades is a move that won't be forgotten. He has effectively alienated himself from the community that once celebrated him. Whether he's officially fired or just socially exiled, the result is the same. The name Dan Dakich will now be synonymous with one of the most unthinkable and career-destroying rants in the history of sports media. It is a sad end to a long career. At the end of the day, this story isn't just about a man losing his job. It's about the changing guard in sports. Caitlin Clark represents the future, and Dan Dakich represents a past that is increasingly out of touch with reality. His shock at being held accountable for his unthinkable comments shows a deep misunderstanding of the world we live in today. As the dust settles, one thing is clear. The game will continue to grow. The fans will continue to support their heroes, and those who choose hate over analysis will always find themselves on the outside looking in.